And some more breaking news out of South Carolina. NBC News can now project that Ralph Norman will advance to the Republican runoff election for the open Senate seat there after Lindsey Graham's sister Darline already advanced a little bit earlier tonight. Let's go to Steve Kornacki over at the big board. Steve, this is a pretty decisive call, relatively early, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you could see here, Graham, I think the story for her is that she wasn't dominant anywhere in the state. It's just consistent. She was running either in first place or second place in basically every county. And you can see here, I think, still some vote to come, but probably going to finish with about a third of the vote in this primary. Meanwhile, Ralph Norman, who's going to oppose her now in the runoff, which will be held 2 weeks from tonight. He's a congressman. His base is right there in the Charlotte suburbs, Rock Hill, York County, this area. And what really did it for him was he expanded his support, as you can see here, across the upstate. This is going outside of his congressional district. And this region it's one of the most deeply conservative areas in South Carolina, very religious, evangelical, fundamentalist. And Norman put up very, very big numbers here that separated him from the rest of Graham's opponents and are going to put him into this runoff. So the question now, obviously, Gotti, becomes, look, this is a 2-week campaign. How do all the political leaders in South Carolina, how do political leaders in the Republican Party nationally, and, of course, how does President Donald Trump, who endorsed Graham, how do they all react to this? How do they react to her finishing first, probably with about a third of the vote, to Norman being the opponent in the runoff? Are there forces in the party that now say they want to get behind Norman and make this a real fight? Or do most of the leaders in the party say, OK, this Graham performance, it's convincing, it's satisfying, we want to get on board? Does the party strongly unite behind her and really put Norman at a disadvantage? That's where the drama and that's where the action shifts right after this result goes final.
And a lot of that will come down to who finishes third and fourth and where they take their voters, right? What are we seeing from the numbers below Graham and Norman here?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, Russell Fry, he's the congressman here, sort of from the Myrtle Beach area. You could see the district that Russell Fry represents in Congress because it's the only part of the state that he won. That dark maroon color is Russell Fry. He swept his congressional district. Okay, what does Fry do? He's one of those people you got to look for in the next 24 hours, maybe tonight. What does he say? Does he come out and say, okay, I want to congratulate Darline Graham on finishing first, and now I'm getting behind her? Or does he say, I want to congratulate Graham and Norman, and I'm Team Norman? Or does he say nothing? Does he stay neutral? But we saw this just recently, governor's primary in South Carolina this spring. We saw the candidate who finished second in the preliminary, who did not have Donald Trump's endorsement, got all of the other defeated candidates around him, Alan Wilson, and then he won the runoff easily. So there is a bit of a precedent for things turning around in runoffs. But, a lot of that there was a lot of movement towards him as soon as that preliminary end. Will there be any movement to Norman, or will it be consolidation to Graham?
Yeah, that was such an interesting case. And yet this one, the dynamic, I guess from an outsider's perspective, we're not in South Carolina, but, it really boils down to are voters here choosing to respect what they see as the legacy that Graham left behind? Are they responding to the president's endorsement? There are a lot of factors here. And I'm not sure if the numbers from tonight can, give us a peek at how things might go there. But do you see anything notable coming out of some of the early vote or some of the votes that we saw today coming in?
I mean, it's almost like looking at art. It's a question of interpretation, right? I mean, we were looking at Darline Graham and saying, she doesn't have any history in elected office. She herself was not really known to almost anybody before the last month or so. Obviously, the family name is a familiar one. Lindsey Graham had his own, sort of issues with parts of the Republican base famously throughout his political career. So there's certainly mixed feelings among Republicans, historically about the Graham family name. So nobody really quite knew what to expect from her as a candidate, with Trump's endorsement, too, obviously hugely helpful to her. But what does that mean when you're looking at about a third of the vote in a crowded, competitive primary here for somebody with that kind of a background? Is that an impressive showing? Does that inspire confidence? I think that's why I'm saying these next 24, 48 hours are so interesting because, everybody's going to get to look at this piece of art and render their interpretation, and then that will kind of decide what the tone is for this runoff.
Art is in the eye of the beholder. Steve Kornacki, thank you so very much. Let's go to NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Noble is in South Carolina right now. Ryan, so the runoff election between Graham and Norman, does that surprise you after talking to voters?
No, actually, this is what I expected, Gotti. I guess easy for me to say now. But yes, I thought the two leading candidates would be Darline Graham and Ralph Norman, and that does appear to be the way it's all going to shake out. And I do think it sets up a fascinating runoff here over the next 2 weeks. There are a lot of layers to this contest between Darline Graham and Ralph Norman. The most obvious one being that Darline Graham has the endorsement of Donald Trump. I expect she will continue to have that endorsement during the runoff. And Ralph Norman has an uneven history with President Trump. He is a Freedom Caucus guy. He is as conservative as they come in the House of Representatives. But he does have this weird part of his background where he endorsed Nikki Haley over Donald Trump in the 2024 Republican primary. And that's something that Donald Trump hasn't forgotten. Now, obviously, there was a deep connection between Ralph Norman and Nikki Haley because they were both from South Carolina. She was the governor of South Carolina. But Donald Trump tends to not look kindly on folks that aren't loyal to him 100% of the time. So that, I'm sure, is something that's going to be brought up time and time again by Graham as she leverages that endorsement of Donald Trump and takes it to the finish line. It is significant, though, that despite all of the win that she had at her back, currently sitting in the seat that her late brother held, the fact that she is her late brother's sister, the fact that she had the endorsement of Donald Trump, that she couldn't get over that 50% threshold. And as you've been talking with Steve throughout the night, it will be interesting to see which way this group of voters that chose not to vote for Norman or for Graham, which way they will end up going. You know, when we talked to her earlier today, she really, at least tried to respond to some of the concerns that we heard from voters about her lack of experience, about this idea that she's just being anointed to this post. And she promised that she was going to work for every single vote and that she felt like she had the wherewithal and the knowledge to take on a job as big as this one. So I do think, even though we did get some clarity here tonight, the next 2 weeks could tell us a whole lot more about where the voters of South Carolina are when it comes to this Senate race, Gotti.
Ryan, I think this is so on point there. Again, this is not a runaway with this race. Did you hear that from voters? Were some of them uncomfortable with the idea of her, being elected to a post? It comes with 6 years after the limited experience that she's seen so far?
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk to voters. We didn't find anybody that didn't like Darline Graham, that didn't think she was a good person, that didn't think, that didn't, empathize with her situation and losing her brother so suddenly, somebody that she had such a close relationship with. There were some that we even spoke to that thought she was a responsible and appropriate choice to be the placeholder for this seat through the balance of his term to the end of the year. But there was this question about whether or not she has the chops to take it on for the next 6 years. And it's likely, because South Carolina is such a Republican state, that whoever emerges from this runoff will take this job for the next 6 years. And when you look back, senators from South Carolina sit in these seats for a very long time. You remember the name Strom Thurmond. He had that seat for a very long time. Lindsey Graham replaced Strom Thurmond. Lindsey Graham was in that seat for 2 decades. Tim Scott has held that seat for a very long time. So this is kind of a generational change that we are talking about in terms of South Carolina's representation. So it makes sense that voters would want to be a bit more methodical about this process and not just rubber stamp whatever Donald Trump tells them to. Now they're going to have 2 more weeks to think about this. They've got now at least a small semblance of a voting record from Darline Graham for the very small amount of time that she has spent in the Senate. She's had an opportunity to talk more about what she cares about. I will say this, Gotti, which I think is important. Covering her in Washington versus covering her here, we were having a hard time getting her to answer any of our questions in the halls of Capitol Hill, which was a marked departure from her brother, who answered all of our questions whenever whenever he was available to talk to us. She did not want to talk to us that much in the halls. Here in South Carolina, you do get the sense that she's feeling more comfortable answering reporters' questions. In this gaggle that we had earlier today, she answered every tough question that was thrown at her about her positions, about this idea that she was being anointed, about what it means for her brother's legacy. So I do think that that's something the voters in South Carolina will respond to. I think they appreciated the fact that Lindsey Graham was always out there and always available to answer the question. So, she's got big shoes to fill regardless of what the outcome is here. And these next 2 weeks are going to be quite the test for her. And it could be a big test for the voters of South Carolina as well.
She's got big shoes to fill. And again, Lindsey Graham's legacy, it's such a complex one. I remember the days of the maverick Lindsey Graham, where he would team up with John McCain. And then we've seen the evolution of his politics. When it comes to her politics, how aligned with the president are they? And what will we see with some of the things that were so close to Lindsey Graham's heart, like Ukraine? Will we see her kind of carry that mantle forward if she is elected?
So we're getting a small glimpse into that, Gotti, but, admittedly, it is a very small sample size. And it's definitely something that has voters here a little concerned, because she doesn't have much of a track record from which to draw from. But we do know that she continues to align herself with President Trump. She says she supports his agenda. She will continue to support him and his agenda. The first piece of legislation that she pushed through was a Russia sanctions bill that had been languishing in the Senate. It was really the death of her brother that finally kind of woke the Senate up. It was a bipartisan piece of legislation that finally crossed through right before they left for the recess. And she was among the people that served as a driving force behind that. She's been very vocal about trying to get this Save America Act passed, which is this controversial voting bill that President Trump wants to get through. But for the most part, she is a blank slate. And, there isn't much to go on here other than what she tells us. And I think that is part of what these next 2 weeks will be about for South Carolina voters.
Yeah. We'll see what happens in the runoff. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.